Summer sky over the Channel, 1940. A silver Spitfire claws its way through thin white cloud, engines singing, guns armed. In the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Alan "Bunny" Hughes has sweat in his gloves and a Messerschmitt Bf 109 in his sights. They've been circling each other for a minute that feels like an hour. The Spitfire can turn a little tighter, the 109 can climb a little harder, and right now they're locked in that deadly balance, where one mistake decides who goes home and who doesn't. Hughes squeezes the throttle, edging closer. The German fills more of his windscreen, the black cross growing larger. Then the 109 does the one thing every RAF pilot dreads. It simply drops. The German pilot shoves his stick forward, dumping the nose into a sudden negative G dive. The Messerschmitt's fuel-injected Daimler-Benz doesn't care. Its prop digs in, and the fighter vanishes downward like it's been yanked on a string. Hughes reacts on instinct. He rams his own stick forward to follow. For half a heartbeat, the world hangs weightless. Then his Merlin coughs. The float carburetor floods, fuel sloshes the wrong way, and the engine that was screaming a second ago chokes back to idle. The prop windmills uselessly. In the space where there should be power and fury, there is only a sick, hollow silence. By the time the engine stutters back, the 109 is a shrinking fleck against the sea, or is already curling up for another attack. Cut. Miles away at Farnborough, a small woman in a leather jacket watches a Merlin on a test stand do the exact same thing, cough itself half to death the moment someone simulates that negative G push. On her bench lies a ring of rough brass pieces that look like scrap. Beatrice Tilly. Shilling is about to bet that one tiny hole in one small piece of junk metal can change what happens in every cockpit like Hughes's. On paper, the fight between the Spitfire and the Bf 109 should have been even. The Spitfire is the poster child of British defiance, thin elliptical wings, a Merlin engine that sounds like pure anger, and controls so light that pilots say they can fly it with 2 fingers. In a tight, positive G turn, it can carve a circle in the sky that makes German pilots sweat. The Hurricane, its slightly older, chunkier cousin, is no slouch either. But both share the same beating heart, an early Rolls-Royce Merlin with a float-type carburetor. In a calm engineering drawing, a float carburetor makes perfect sense. Fuel sits in a little chamber, a float rises and falls to meter how much goes into the engine, and everything stays happy as long as down is where you expect it to be. In a dogfight, down is wherever the pilot decides. Across the Channel, the Bf 109 carries a Daimler-Benz engine with fuel injection. Instead of relying on a float and gravity, it uses pumps to blast fuel straight in under pressure. So when the German pilot shoves the stick forward and throws himself into negative G, the fuel doesn't slosh away from anything important. The engine just keeps pulling. That one difference writes the script for dozens of fights. RAF pilots learn it the hard way. Chase a 109 too close, and he'll simply bunt into a dive. If you, in your Merlin-powered Spit, slam the stick forward to follow, the fuel in your carburetor does a little rebellion, rushes the wrong way, and floods the engine. The nose goes down, and the power goes away. The workaround is awkward and slow. British pilots discover that if they roll upside down first and then pull down, they can follow the dive while keeping positive G on the engine. It works, sort of, but that extra half second to roll, pull, and stabilize is all the time a good German pilot needs to either escape or turn the tables. So in the summer and autumn of 1940, you get the strange reality behind the heroic posters. In a straight, honest, positive G dogfight, a Spitfire can dance with any 109. The moment the fight tips into sudden nose-down, negative G chaos, the British pilot is flying with one hand tied, and everyone on both sides knows it. Back at Farnborough, Beatrice Shilling has the graphs and test data that explain why. Now she has to find a way to cheat gravity itself. For the pilots, the problem doesn't show up in engineering reports. It shows up in stories, told in low, tired voices in dispersal huts after sorties. A Spitfire pilot comes back with cannon holes stitched along his wings and says, "I had him. I swear I had him." He traces the fight in the air with his hand. "I was right on his tail. Then he just pushed over. I followed, engine died, and he slid away like I'd hit pause on my own airplane." Another remembers diving to avoid an attack, shoving the stick forward in panic. "The Merlin quit on me just as his tracers went over the canopy. For a second, I was a glider with guns. If he hadn't broken off, I wouldn't be here." They learn the half-roll trick, rolling inverted first, then pulling down to keep positive G on the fuel system. It works, but it's clumsy. In the time it takes to roll and pull, the 109 has already opened the gap or reversed on them. Instructors can draw clever solutions on blackboards. Over northern France, clever costs altitude and seconds they don't have. At Farnborough, Beatrice Shilling sees the same thing in a different language. On her desk, combat reports pile up. In the test cell, graphs show fuel pressure spikes and mixture going wildly rich the instant negative G is imposed. On paper, the Merlin is magnificent. On the stand, under simulated combat maneuvers, it behaves like a temperamental thoroughbred. She suggests simple, practical fixes and runs into the same brick wall again and again. Too crude. Too temporary. "We're working on a proper carburetor redesign, Miss Shilling." Proper takes time. Pilots are dying now. She's one of the only women in a room full of men with titles and decades of experience. Some see the girl who races motorbikes, not the combustion specialist who actually understands how fuel sloshes at 5,000 feet and 3G. So she does what good engineers under pressure always do. She stops asking for permission and starts looking for something she can build today, with the tools she can reach and the brass that's already in the scrap bin. The core of the problem is simple and ugly. Under negative G, the carburetor doesn't starve the engine. It drowns it. The float drops, the needle valve opens too far, and an angry slug of fuel surges into the supercharger, flooding the mixture so badly the engine chokes. It's like trying to sprint while someone shoves a bucket of gasoline down your throat. Shilling stares at the carburetor cross-section one more time and realizes something. Everyone is thinking about how to feed the engine more reliably. What if the answer is to hold it back just a little? In the RAE workshop, she takes a length of brass bar from the discard pile and chucks it into a lathe. The metal spins, tools bite, and slowly a tiny thimble-shaped insert appears. A simple sleeve with a precisely calculated hole through its center. If she can limit the maximum flow into the carburetor, then even when the float goes wild under negative G, the surge of fuel can't get big enough to drown the engine. At full positive G power, the hole is still large enough to feed everything the Merlin needs. At the worst moment, it acts like a governor against panic. It's inelegant. It doesn't solve inverted flying. It's the kind of fix that makes purist designers wince. It's also something ground crews can install with hand tools in an afternoon. On the test stand, they bolt the modified carburetor to a Merlin and start a run. The engine roars up to power. A technician simulates a pushover. Fuel head changes, load shifts, the conditions that normally trigger a cough. The Merlin stumbles, then catches itself and keeps pulling. Again, harder this time. Same result, a wobble instead of a blackout. The senior men crowd around the gauges, frowning in a way that means they're impressed and don't want to show it. Someone mutters that it's a stopgap at best, a crude orifice. The nickname writes itself, Miss Shilling's orifice. Crude or not, the data is clear. It works. It can be made by the 100 from scrap brass, and it can be fitted to every fighter carburetor in Britain faster than any proper redesign. Now someone has to carry it out of the lab and into the war. Early 1941, an RAF fighter station in southern England. Spitfires sit wings to wings on the grass, paint scuffed, gun ports patched with fresh red tape. Ground crews in oily overalls eye the unfamiliar RA truck and the small woman climbing out of it with a metal case under one arm. Beatrice Shilling, Royal Aircraft Establishment, she says. I've brought you a present for your Merlins. In the hangar, she opens the case. Inside lie rows of small brass inserts, gleaming like oversized washers. The fitters look politely unimpressed. You're telling me, one says, wiping his hands, that a couple of bits of plumbing are going to beat the Hun's fuel injection? She doesn't waste breath arguing. Instead, she shrugs off her jacket, rolls up her sleeves, and joins them under the cowling of the first Spitfire. Right, she says. Let's get dirty. They pull the top off the carburetor, install the restrictor, and button it back up. It takes hours, not days. No hoists, no factory refits, just spanners, safety wire, and stubbornness. When she's satisfied, she goes looking for a pilot. Flight Lieutenant Hughes, still annoyed about the 109 that dived away from him last month, volunteers. On the briefing board, she sketches the test profile. Full power at altitude. Then I want you to do the one thing they tell you never to do with a Merlin. Push the nose straight down, hard, no half roll. He raises an eyebrow. And if the engine quits? Then you'll have proved me wrong, she says evenly. But I don't think it will. At 20,000 feet over the channel, Hughes levels off, checks his gauges, and shoves the throttle forward. Right then, he mutters, for science. He slams the stick forward. His stomach lurches as the spit tips into -G. For a split second, he braces for that familiar, gut-sinking cough. The Merlin's song wobbles and then steadies. Boost holds. The prop stays biting clean air. He barks a laugh into his oxygen mask, half disbelieving. Then he does it again. Harder. Same result. A brief complaint, not the total blackout he's learned to fear. Back on the field, he taxis in fast, rips off his helmet, and practically sprints to Shilling. It works, he says, breathless. I pushed her over like a madman and she never died. He jabs a thumb at the Spitfire. Whatever that thing is, every crate on this field needs it yesterday. Not long after, over France, a Bf 109 tries the old escape. The German shoves his stick forward and dives, expecting the British fighter behind him to falter. This time, the Spitfire stays right on him, nose down, engine howling, following him into what used to be his private escape hatch. For the first time, the 109 pilot learns what it feels like to be the one who can't shake the shadow on his tail. Once word gets out, Shilling's life turns into a road trip. She and a small team spend the next months bouncing from base to base, carrying boxes of brass restrictors and stacks of instructions. Biggin Hill, Tangmere, North Weald, every station with Spitfires or Hurricanes at the sharp end of the war. Ground crews greet her with a mix of curiosity and impatience. The moment the first converted pilots come back, grinning instead of swearing, the impatience turns into demand. Have we got Miss Shilling's gadget yet? Put that orifice thing in mind before the next patrol, would you? By March 1941, the mod has spread through Fighter Command. New carburetors arriving from the factory incorporate its lessons. It's still not perfect. Pilots can't hang upside down forever. But the days of engines dying at the first hint of -G are fading fast. Tactically, something subtle but crucial changes. German pilots notice that their old party trick doesn't work as well. A Spitfire that once would have rolled awkwardly and fallen behind now sometimes just shoves its nose down and comes along for the ride. The clean, guaranteed escape dive becomes a gamble. Some take it anyway. Some, sensing the risk, try something else. On the RAF side, confidence grows. Pilots feel freer to use bunt maneuvers defensively, to snap the nose down to spoil an enemy's aim, without wondering if they're about to turn their fighter into a glider at the worst possible moment. You can't put a neat number on how many lives that little washer saves. The 2,100 pilots line you sometimes hear is more legend than ledger entry. But across thousands of sorties, every time a Merlin keeps running where it once would have quit, another name gets a chance not to end up on a memorial wall. When jet engines replace pistons and carburetors, the war moves on. So does Beatrice Shilling. She stays at Farnborough, turning her attention to new problems: jet performance, high-speed aerodynamics, ways to keep even faster, hotter engines from tearing themselves apart. She earns honors, including an OBE, and the respect of colleagues who once saw only the woman with the motorbike. Outside the lab, she keeps racing, tuning Nortons and cars, forever the engineer who wants to feel the machine, not just calculate it. Decades later, when historians dig back into the fine print of the air war, her name resurfaces. Museum placards and articles mention Miss Shilling's orifice with a mix of amusement and admiration. The tiny brass part that let Spitfires and Hurricanes finally follow their enemies into the dives they'd been taunted with since 1940. Not bad for something literally born from scrap. On the surface, this is a story about a washer in a carburetor. Look a little closer, and it's about a woman who refused to accept that that's just how it is. When pilots were dying over a few seconds of lost power, her fix didn't make headlines. It just quietly changed what was possible in a fight, and helped bring home a lot of men who never knew her name. What you've heard here is rooted in real history, with dialogue and specific scenes dramatized to put you in the cockpit and the workshop. For deep research, always go to professional historians and archives. If you want more forgotten World War II stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and which unsung innovators you'd like to hear about next.